Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. And today I welcome Michelle to the show. So welcome, Michelle. Glad to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So a quick introduction to Michelle, and we're going to dive into today's conversation. So Michelle Curran is a former US Air Force fighter pilot and the second woman ever to fly as the lead solo with the elite Thunderbirds demonstration team. She's now a best-selling author and keynote speaker, using her experience in high-performance, high-pressure environments to help people flip fear into their greatest asset. Her new book, The Flip Side, is all about how boldness, mindset, and action can rewrite your story, especially when self-doubt creeps in. Michelle, welcome. That's an awesome background in terms of flying, and I'm loving the helmet in the background as well that I can see. Uh, that's an incredible thing to do. So yeah, it'd be really great to hear a little bit about you were this pilot, and you were doing that, and now you've transitioned into being a best-selling author, a speaker, inspiring people. So yeah, what got you in that transition from being a pilot to then actually going out there and then sharing that message?
Yeah. So I was flying with the Thunderbirds, and normally that is a 2-year assignment, but right in the middle of my time was the pandemic. And so I got
Mm,
asked to do a third year because of that. So I was already 1 year past the normal amount of time. And it's only 2 years usually because it is a very fun and cool and rewarding job, but it's also very challenging. You're on the road traveling almost 250 days per year. So it is a grind. You're away from your family a lot, and it's really hard on your body physically as well. Like the demands of flying a high G performance aircraft where you're pulling 9 times the force of gravity multiple times a week, it really starts to create a lot of wear and tear physically. And so for me, my time on the Thunderbirds was ending no matter what I decided to do next. And I was at 13 years on active duty in the Air Force. And so I could have stayed and tried to reach 20 years, retired. I would have probably gone to an operational squadron, continued to fly the F 16. So that was definitely an option. The other option was to get out and pursue something else. And most of my peers who have left the Air Force at that point go to fly for the airlines. That's a very natural transition to continue to use your flying skills and go do it on the civilian side. But for me, the my favorite part of being with the Thunderbirds, at first it was the flying because that's like just it's just super fun flying, right? Upside down, super maneuverable. You're doing all these twirls and climbs and loops, and it's really difficult but very fun. But as I was on the team longer, and that I wouldn't say it became routine, but you got good at it so it didn't consume all of your brain space all of the
mm,
time, and you got to enjoy other parts of the job a little bit more. I loved these inspirational moments I was having with people. And so we would fly an air show, we'd land, we'd go up to this autograph line afterwards to meet fans. And, my first year on the team, I didn't really think about it being any different than anyone else. And I'm signing all these autographs, like one after the other. All these pamphlets with our pictures and stuff are just being like shoved into my face, signing madly. And then I look to my right, and one of my other pilots on the team, one of my friends, had come up and he's like, "Hey Mace, how's it going?" And I'm like, "Why are you not signing autographs still?" And I look up, and I have this massive line, and the other pilots have signed all the autographs of all the people that were waiting. And it's because all of these parents were bringing their daughters up to meet me as one of the only female pilots that the team has had, and the only one at the time. And I realized that I was just in this unique role that not a lot of women had been in. And in any other squadron, no one cares if you're a man or a woman. Like, does not matter how you do the job, right? Like, the jet
mm,
flies the same, mission success or failure is like graded the same. But on the Thunderbirds, where the mission is recruit, retain, and inspire, you are able to connect with half the population in a different way. And I would have these interactions where a parent would bring their daughter up who might be like 7, 8, 9 years old and be like, "Look, she just flew that jet you just watched." And you would see this little girl have this light bulb moment where their eyes would light up. They connected the dots and they're just like, wait, someone that looks like me did that thing that seems like something only superheroes do. And you would see that what they saw as possible for them in the world just got bigger.
Mm.
And it was the coolest thing to be in a position where I could do that for other people. And that was, just that surface level of them just seeing the Thunderbirds. And I knew I had so much more behind that to my story that could really impact a lot of people. And the fact that I ended up in this very high profile job that gets put on this pedestal made it even more powerful because I had struggled my entire career with self doubt, with the fear of failure, with like overly being worried about judgment of other people, imposter syndrome, all
Mm.
of these things that I think are just the human experience. But we never talked about them in the military. And of course, I wasn't out there talking about them as a Thunderbird pilot. And so when I realized that I would really like to give people a peek behind the curtain and let them see that I was just a normal person with all the same struggles as them, but here's how I overcame them. Here's how I went on and did this thing that again gets put in such a spotlight flying for the Thunderbirds. And if I can do that, so can they. Maybe not fly a fighter jet, but their equivalent of it. And so I started talking about it on keynote stages, and the reception was just incredible. And I decided that that was what I wanted to do full time is create my own business with that as the mission to uplift other people and to figure out just how to do that. And it started as speaking. I wrote two children's picture books. And then I started pretty quickly after that working on the book that just came out, The Flip Side, which was about a 3-year process. And now they're all out in the world and it's been awesome.
That's awesome. I love that, and just like lighting up the hopes and dreams of the young girls who came to see you, and then just allowing people to see what possible. That's an awesome transition. So the flip side, that's your latest book. That's come out. Yeah. What's kind of the main theme behind that one?
Yeah, so the subtitle is How to Invert Your Perspective and Turn Fear
Mm.
into Your Superpower. And it's a play on, I mean, for anyone that's seen the cover, I am upside down on it. And it's a play on all the inverted flying that I did. So as the lead solo, I flew inverted more than anyone else on the team. And it was just an insane perspective to see the world from 150 feet off the ground, traveling at over 400 miles an hour, and getting to travel all over the United States and see just like 40 different cities every year from that perspective. It was wild. And so as I started to put the book together and kind of looked at the different themes that were coming up again and again, because each story is based on some crazy thing that happened in the cockpit. And, some of these are emergencies or near misses or mistakes that were made. And so it's very page turning when it comes to that in a very unique perspective. But I realized that the through line was really about flipping how we view these obstacles, these setbacks, and taking fear and realizing that it doesn't have to be this stop sign, that it's just a signal, and giving ourselves perspective on what fear really is and where it comes from, and that we can keep moving forward. We can go do the thing that scares us, but so many of us use it as this litmus test of whether or not we should do something, and very rarely are we actually in physical danger, even though to our bodies, to our physiological response, it can feel that way because of our primitive brains, right? We were very
Mm.
scared of a saber-toothed tiger. It turns out there's not a lot of those running around anymore. So usually the fear that stops us is the fear of judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of shame, of embarrassment, and that we are not very good at stopping, zooming out, and taking an objective look at the pros and the cons and what our goals really are. And that if we're able to do that, oftentimes we will go do the scary thing because the rewards far outweigh that feeling of fear. And I wanted to teach people that in the book in a way that was really relatable. And so, yes, it's about finding the flip side. Yes, there's a play on being inverted, but really the lessons in each chapter are not just for pilots, not just for military. They're for anyone that is facing an obstacle where they know there's an opportunity, but they hesitate to go after it because they're scared.
So so was I right in understanding teaching people to understand really why their goal is such a driver for them that it outweighs the fear?
Yeah, because I think for most of us, we will find ourselves in these situations where the worst case scenario is often really not that bad, but we will just twirl in our heads. Oh, we'll spiral down and we'll be like, okay, well, what if this happens and this happens? And then the sky is falling. And there's some things you can do if you can gain perspective on it, right? Like you recognize that inner voice of doubt for what it is, that it's not always factual, right? Like the thoughts we have, just because we're having them does not mean they're the truth. And I know that sounds obvious, but I think we all have found ourselves just in that spiral of worry and worst case scenarios. And when you're thinking about it and you have no one to bounce it off of, and it's just in your mind, it really does feel like the truth. And so helping people recognize that when it's happening, teaching them skills of how to separate themselves from those thoughts and, tell someone about them or write it out on paper and just shine some light on it and get it out of their head. And then it takes away the power. And suddenly you're like, oh, that worst case scenario is A, not very likely. And B, even if it did happen, I could probably handle it. Or I can do some things to prepare so I can handle it. And then we can move forward because we have a better, like, logical pro con list at that point. But most of us don't even get to that point of analyzing with our logical brain. We get stuck in that fear cycle. And I wanted to give people frameworks and tools that were rooted in human psychology that are framed in these crazy stories from the jet, but that they're just so useful for anyone facing any situation like that.
I love that. Like the mind, the mind can do some crazy things and get us into that fight or flight response, right? Just from, and then I like what you're saying about getting it on paper and actually seeing what it is. How you prepare for the worst case scenario, which is often not that bad. So yeah, I love that kind of perspective you've got on it. I know, obviously, as a forward pilot, and you've been around many others. I would kind of see yourself and those people as very like high performers, but I know there's a lot of high performers out there, whether it's like a CEO, someone in leadership running their own business, but there's many high performers. Why do you think so many high performers struggle with self-doubt?
I think often when you get to those highest performing positions, the things that drove you to get there can actually become a vice at a certain point. Like it's a double edged sword. On one side, they're driving you forward, your drive for perfectionism, for achievement. That's what makes you get up in the morning and go do the thing again and again. But it also can create unrealistic expectations of yourself. And so when you become a beginner at something, so you're brand new to being the CEO, or you've gone through all of this school and now you're actually going to do the job day one, or those different transition points that we hit multiple times throughout our lives, where you've had control of the situation, say in an academic setting, and now you go somewhere and all of a sudden you're supposed to do the job and you don't know anything. You're a beginner. And it can be really hard to be a high achiever as a beginner at something when oftentimes it's not all in your control and it just takes a lot of time and repetition to get good at something. And I know, speaking as that personality type myself, you can find yourself in this situation where if you're not just good at something right out the gate, you're like, who am I? Like, what is my identity, even if I'm not the person that just is good at everything? And am I the person cut out for this job? Like, you start to have that doubt creep in and that imposter syndrome creep in because we will push ourselves into environments that inherently have very high expectations, are high performing, but then we also have extremely high expectations, often unrealistic of ourselves. And so the combination of those two things, along with being new at something and just being bad at it because you're new, is the perfect recipe for us to get into that spiral of, do I even belong here? Am I even the person for the job? Should I just quit? And I think so many high performers find themselves in that cycle.
Just like the fear of not being enough almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's twofold. We are good at things over and over, maybe as at a young age.
Hmm.
And that can create this expectation from those around us that that's just how we are, parents or siblings or your community or whoever. And then we kind of step into that as like, oh, I'm the golden child of the family, or I'm the valedictorian of my high school, or whatever. And when we deviate from that, we're all of a sudden like, I have no inherent value unless I'm achieving. And
Hmm.
I'm failing right now at achieving. So like what am I even doing here? That's a dangerous spot to find yourself in.
Hmm. So is it almost like having to do a bit of identity work in that case?
And I would say that's exactly right. And when I, went through pilot training, had gone to college on a full scholarship thanks to the Air Force, graduated magna cum laude. Like I was a good student. I was academics were always my strong suit. Go to pilot training, get a fighter jet, which was super competitive to get, and then go learn to fly the F-16 for a year. So I have spent like 7, 8 years through college, through pilot training, and I've had to work really hard, but my work ethic has allowed me to excel in pretty much every environment. And then I get to my first operational squadron. Everyone there is now experienced. I'm not with other students. I am with people who have been doing the job for years. The stakes are way higher. Like we could find ourselves in a combat situation tomorrow. Like things matter. And it is going to take me years to get my arms around this. Like it is not a skill set you can learn in weeks or months, no matter how hard you work. And as I started to make errors in the jet, which in hindsight were very, very normal for the stage I was at in learning, but I could not see that. I was like, holy crap, I am not good at this. Somehow I snuck under the radar for the last 7 years. And now I'm here and everyone else is better than me. Everyone else knows more than I do. And I have to prove myself in this very competitive type A environment. And so I feel like I don't belong here. I feel like I'm struggling, but I'm afraid to let other people see that because that's a sign of weakness, which I equated to a signal that I didn't deserve to be there. And so I'm doing all of that in this like self-doubt spiral by myself because I'm so afraid to tell anyone that I'm feeling that way. And I think that really kept me stuck. And exactly, I had this identity crisis of like, who am I to even be in this position?
Hmm. No, it's very interesting how the mind works when we get into those identities of like who are we, and that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, Michelle, I know you've been obviously probably been in a lot of high pressure situations, and uh, that can be in different forms in the world. People can be different, like high pressure situations. Is there anything you could offer us on staying calm in those high pressure situations that has helped you?
Yeah, to give you some like very tangible, actionable takeaways. So when I was learning to air refuel, so that's when I'm flying my F-16 fighter jet up to this giant tanker aircraft, like 25,000 feet in the air. We're traveling at over 300 knots, and they have a boom that sticks out the back. And I need to drive forward so they can connect to my jet. Right behind my head is where the port is, and I can take gas airborne. It's like a critical skill that gives the F-16 a lot more range to travel all over the world. It is very difficult to learn because you have two airplanes literally touching, at 300 some knots. And it takes very fine motor skills and finesse on both sides to get the airplanes in the right position to be able to connect and then hold stable. And so, as a new student, I'm trying to learn this, and it's very stressful. And as you would get close to where the boom is about to plug in, the F-16 stick is super sensitive. It's like pressure sensitive, so it only moves about a quarter of an inch in each direction. And you would find yourself squeezing the stick, over gripping it, like moving all over the place. You're too high, and then you'd overcorrect and be too low and too high, and we would call it a porpoise, like a dolphin, right? Like you'd be up and down, and you get into this pilot-induced oscillation. Not a good place to be. It would freak the boom operator out. They'd tell you to return to stern, back your jet up and start over, and you'd be embarrassed. And the instructor's back there yelling at you, and you're just like, there's so many competing demands. I got to get this right. So I had an instructor tell me that as I got to that point where I could feel the stress rising, I could feel myself start to over control the aircraft, that I should wiggle my toes. And I was like, cool, I'm flying a $30 million fighter jet. You want me to wiggle my toes? That sounds dumb. Uh, but I was like, I'll take all the tips I can get. So next flight we go up, I'm approaching the boom, same thing starting to happen. But I remember what she told me, and I focus on my feet inside my boots and I wiggle my toes for just a few seconds. And it was like magic. Like, it allowed me to relax. Like, my grip relaxed on the stick a little bit. I got out of this like hyper focused over vigilance where I was trying to over control something that didn't need controlling at that level. And it allowed me to like be back in the present, back in my body, and kind of just like recenter. And I have shared that tip with a lot of different people. And I've heard from so many flight instructors in all parts of aviation, some that are like older veterans from like Vietnam era, all the way up to young flight instructors, that they will tell their students wiggle their toes. And it's just this magical physical disruptor that can bring you out of almost that like panic type state and recenter you, and it increases performance pretty substantially, and it works in any situation. Like, you're giving a presentation, you feel yourself starting to freak out a little bit, like just pause for a split second, wiggle your toes, no one's going to notice. Or you're in a conflict with your spouse and you're about to lose it and say something that you'll regret, pause for a second, wiggle your toes. It almost works like pausing and taking a deep breath. It's just a different physical disruptor, but it's not as noticeable, right? So if you're in the middle of a boardroom and you're presenting and all of a sudden you like pause, close your eyes, take a deep breath, people are like, oh, they're struggling. Where you wiggle your toes under the table, no one knows. So it's been a really powerful tool. So that's number one. And then the second one, you're taught early in pilot training to compartmentalize. And you will be told again and again, like, hey, you're going to have flights where things go wrong. You're going to make mistakes. That's okay. What you can't do is dwell on that mistake and let it snowball into the next thing, right? Because you're like, oh, I just messed that up, and you're distracted. There's no time to be distracted because you always need to be focused on the next task you need to be doing. And so if you dwell on them, it quickly starts to impact the rest of your performance. So they would tell us to compartmentalize. I never knew exactly like a technique for doing that, but in my mind, what I would do is I would make an error on a flight. I would literally picture locking it in a box and throwing out the back of the airplane. And so my kid, who's now 12, when he started pitching in Little League, he was like 9, 10 maybe. There's a lot of pressure on pitchers. Everyone's watching. You can win or lose the game. He would get so stressed out on the mound. He would cry sometimes. And so I told him about that. I was like, look, you have a bad pitch or you have a bad inning. That's going to happen. You're learning. When that happens, I would see him like start to get mad and frustrated. I was like, I want you to take all of your feelings around that mistake, put him in a giant treasure chest like on SpongeBob, throw that crusty lock on there, and imagine throwing it off a boat into the ocean. We'll talk about that afterwards. And so he would start to use that visualization, and it really, really helped him in baseball. And so it sounds silly again, wiggling your toes and putting your mistakes in a treasure chest. You're like, wow, what sage advice from a fighter pilot. But seriously, both of those things work extremely well in high pressure situations.
I love those. Very simple as well. Simple and effective.
Exactly.
Love it in the
Easy to
moment.
execute.
Yeah, wiggle your toes. No one can see either. So, like you said in the boardroom, you take that breath. Yeah, oh, that's really cool. Yeah, Michelle, I know you are offering a lot out there and you're helping people with some of with your stories, and you've obviously got your book or books out there. Before we wrap up, where's the best place for the listener to find you and your books? And is there a final point you wanted to share with us today?
Yeah, so my website is just my call sign and my last name, so macecurran.com. All the books are on there. The newer book, The Flip Side, is available at all the major retailers, Hudson News and Airports, Barnes and Noble. It's on Amazon. And then the children's books are also on Amazon. Instagram is always good, Mace_Curran. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I create content there. And when I'm always asked for one piece of advice to give people or like one big takeaway, the thing I always say, because it seems to resonate with pretty much everyone, is that the key to progress is having the courage to start something, even when you don't feel ready, but believing in yourself enough to know you will figure it out along the way.
Mm.
That is it. Like, it seems obvious, but the number of us that expect there to be this like confidence or feeling of readiness before we take action, and we're just waiting and waiting for that, and it never comes, that's not how it works. It's the action that creates the confidence, it's the action that creates the feeling of readiness. And so I really want to push people to make, I call them SBCs, small, bold choices. Military loves
Mm.
acronyms, so SBCs, because it doesn't have to be this life changing, monumental thing that you go do. You don't have to like blow up your life, quit your job, move across the country. It can be something super small that feels just slightly bold, slightly uncomfortable. Make that choice today and then do it again tomorrow. And after a few months, you look back, and the things that feel like small, bold choices now are things that would have been absolutely unattainable a few months ago. It like really gives you building block approach to accelerate your progress.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, there have to be these massive jumps, like you said. Um, yeah, SBCs. So just these small, bold moves. So thank you, Michelle, for coming on today. Really appreciate that. So we'll be linking Michelle's info, including grabbing her books, in the show notes below. So once again, a massive thank you, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.